Hey everybody, if you enjoy the podcast and the content it provides, be sure to hop over and check out the community. The community is an exclusive members website that is just an extension of what we do here in July at the Central Virginia Sport Performance Seminar. What it is a combination of video lectures, a coach's corner with your Monday morning take-home information, and a forum where you can talk about anything and everything related to the field of strength and conditioning. In the community, you'll find content added each month from some of the top practitioners in the world, ranging from PhDs to high level coaches, bringing you exactly what they're doing with their athletes or their research at the present moment. On top of that, an additional discussion by coaches bringing you that Monday morning information, things that you can add to your training program right away. Tying that in with the opportunity to discuss with coaches around the world in the forum on anything and everything from the topics addressed in these presentations to whatever you're seeing in your daily life as a coach. If this sounds like the right thing for you and your staff, go ahead and hop over to cvasps.com/community and try it out for 48 hours for just $1. If you like it, you're signed up, ready to roll, and you're jumping into all the great content added each month. If not, feel free to go ahead and cancel at any time. No questions asked. We're really excited about what we're building in the community and hope you are too. Go ahead and hop over to cvasps.com/community and check it out today.
What's up, guys? This is Jake Jensen, the head strength coach with the Ice Baron Hockey Club in Berlin, Germany, coming at you guys on My Thoughts Monday. Today I want to talk a little bit about GPS in team sports, specifically using GPS to predict injuries and in an effort to prevent them with team sport athletes. The first thing I want to cover with GPS is as an organization, a sports organization, specifically for pro clubs. The same is true for college teams as well, but for pro clubs, there's always a cost benefit associated with using technology within an organization. And I think that with GPS, the first thing that an organization has to consider is the cost of using the technology worth the benefit that it brings to the organization. And obviously with GPS, the benefit is that you don't have injured players, and just saving a couple of games for an injured guy, let alone the possibility of preventing a career-ending injury, is worth a lot of money, especially for pro clubs, given that the price of having a professional player injured and still receiving a paycheck is significant for any professional team in any league. Either in the United States or abroad. And so that makes GPS a really attractive technology in terms of cost benefit. Obviously it's not cheap to use GPS, but the money that you save by preventing injury makes it worth using it. And so I think the next question that an organization would ask is, it sounds like a great investment, so what is it going to cost us to use it? And I think that in my experience using GPS with team sports, there are a couple things that teams maybe don't anticipate when getting into GPS. Obviously, the technology itself requires someone to collect the data, which a lot of times that job will fall to the strength coach. And in my experience, that's not a great model to use when using GPS, because just sitting in front of the computer and time stamping the practice is a very small part of collecting the data with GPS. So most of the time in my experience with collecting the data is involved in getting the units ready before practice, which before practice for a strength coach, there are obviously responsibilities there that need to be taken care of. So if someone has to get the GPS units ready, program them before practice, they have to put them in to either the harness or the shirt or whatever it is that the players use to wear the unit. Those harnesses have to be placed into the lockers of the players. And then once that's done, the live collection unit has to be taken out to the field or into the practice rink, wherever the collection's taking place, and someone has to sit physically in front of the computer and timestamp the practice. That's not necessarily required. That can be done after the fact. But time stamping the practice is something that has to happen. And so if that responsibility falls to the strength coach, that's extra hours onto their day, whether it's during practice or afterwards. So that's something to consider. Also, once the raw data is collected and time-stamped, there's the process of filtering through the raw data and deciding what is useful for each specific coach, whether it's the head coach or position coaches. Someone has to decide what's useful from the data that was collected, because modern GPS applications often collect accelerometer data in addition to GPS. So there are a bunch of things that need to be sifted through, and if the strength coach is the person who is going to go through all that stuff, that has to be considered. In my experience, using GPS, it takes somewhere between 20 and 40 hours a week for one team to go through all of the data, collect it, go through the process of collection, which, like I say, includes setting up the bra, the man bra thing that they wear, or the compression shirt, cleaning them up afterwards, going through the locker room or waiting at the end of practice to collect the shirt, pull all the units out, make sure one of those doesn't go through the wash and get ruined, just to get the data into the computer, and then have to go through it and decide what's useful. So that's something to consider too when using GPS, is just the time investment that's required from the person who runs the application. In my experience, that's significant time commitment, and for a guy who's in charge of programming training for the athletes to do that to do GPS on top of those responsibilities is like 2 full-time jobs for one guy. And it presents logistical problems because the strength coach has work to do when the GPS work is being done, preparing the units. Another consideration when you're talking about how to use the raw data is an organization needs to ask themselves, is the GPS data that's being collected accurate? I think that's consideration number 3. There's been a lot of research done over the last 10 years on GPS specifically, but also there's been a fair amount of research done on accelerometers as well. The main person that comes to mind for me, because I saw him speak in 2016, is Aaron Coots down at the Australian Institute of Sport. Has done quite a few studies on GPS to validate whether or not the GPS unit is accurate and reliable. There was a study done with him, I think he was on the study, evaluating the inter-unit reliability, having one player wear 2 units, GPS units, to see if they both collect the same data for that athlete who's doing the drills. And I think that the reliability was okay. It wasn't great. But that's something to consider when you're putting together a report on GPS, or if an organization is looking to use it and wants someone to report to the coach to predict injury. What that looks like is that person has to recommend to the coach whether that player sits or plays. And if that recommendation is based on technology that is only 50% accurate at high speed, which for a lot of team sports, that's your highest load time, is when the athlete is traveling at a high rate of speed, whether it's high change of direction or sprinting. Some of these studies that have been done, and a lot of those studies were on units that use a 5 hertz collection rate or 1 hertz, and I think a lot of these applications now are using 10 hertz collection rate GPS units, which is more accurate. But if that data is based on something that's only 50% accurate, it's hard for anybody, let alone a strength coach, to recommend to the head coach that this probably star athlete doesn't play. It's like, hey, you should based on this not play the guy, and I'm 50% sure that that's a good recommendation. So I don't think that's something that any strength coach is gonna be comfortable doing, and as an organization looking into GPS, probably isn't like what you're going for. You don't want to pay a bunch of money for something that maybe isn't as accurate as it could be. And I could be wrong on that. Like, the research could be showing that it's more accurate than 50% at high rate of speed. But that's something else to consider specifically with GPS itself, is that each athlete in a team needs to have specific bands set up for what is high intensity movement, because when the unit comes to the team stock, all of those speed bands are the same for everyone. And like in football, for example, clearly an offensive lineman, his 100% speed is not the same as the 100% speed for a wide receiver or for a cornerback. And so somebody has to go in, assess for each individual what is high speed, and then change all of those bands to reflect that intensity within the collection of the GPS unit. Otherwise, you're getting severely underestimated data for faster players, or really overestimated data for contact players. And the other thing is that players like linemen, who most of their high intensity movements aren't based on physical displacement, it's based more on physical contact. In one play, a lineman maybe moves 10 yards, but he's not walking, even though the rate of movement is walking pace. It's a lot higher intensity activity. He's basically fighting for 10 yards. And so that's something else to consider, where the GPS unit is bringing you the most value. Lastly, I think sort of the fourth consideration for GPS is when you quantify something like sports, you have to understand that the statistical measure of how that quantifiable number relates to the sport needs to be done by someone who understands statistical measures. You can't just, well, I guess you could just say we have this number and it means that the guy's tired. But basically, when you follow that like logic through to the end, what you're going to find is that the person running the GPS is going to tell the coach, hey, the one-on-ones are more intense than the walkthrough. And the coach is going to look at the guy and be like, yeah, I know. Like, why do we pay X amount of dollars for a black box to tell me what I already know? I know one-on-ones are more intense. I know that team is more intense than one-on-ones. That's the way I plan the practice. The technology is powerful if the person who's interpreting the data has the skill to extract what you're trying to learn. So I think the takeaway there is that when you're looking into numbers for predictive analytics, you need to, as an organization, hire someone who has the skill with statistical measures and quantifiable numbers to interpret the quantifiable data. Otherwise, you just have someone who's telling a coach what he already knows, and the organization loses money, and the coaches become frustrated with using technology, and that presents problems down the line for using injury predictive models based on technology. And so I think, in my opinion and in my experience, GPS has a lot of potential for predicting injury, but there are certain criteria that have to be understood, I think, at an organizational level. The commitment of funds, the commitment of time by whoever's going to run it, and then the understanding that using statistics for predicting injury takes time. You have to collect data for individuals based on their position. There's a high variability in terms of output between players, which is something that sport coaches have known forever. Not all wide receivers are the same. Some guys are much more high motor than other guys. The same is true for the statistics for that guy. So it's difficult to standardize an injury prediction model for a team, let alone, position group, because there's a high amount of variability between players and how they play their game. So I don't want to be a downer on GPS or say that it's not good, because it's not what I'm saying at all. I think it's a powerful tool for predicting injury when an organization understands what is required to use the technology for what it's intended to do. And so on Monday, those are my thoughts on GPS, and we'll talk to you guys soon.